Hello again, Ian Stokey with Mastermind Games again, and this time painting the Cephalyx Mindbender and Drudges from the Mercenaries faction of Warmachine. I'm getting that weird echo thing again. Let me try something. Okay. Testing? Alright. That was something. I don't know what, but it was definitely something. 09116 Brilliant Blue. I don't think that new camera angle in the last couple of videos was working out, so we're going to try it again. So all I can do is keep trying till I get it right. So this particular model is the Mindbender itself. The Cephalyx may or may not have started out as human, but they are definitely not now. They have tremendous psychic powers, which they augment further by surgically enhancing their brains, leading to the elongated skulls. They hover off the ground, and as you can see, they augment their bodies with these extra mechanical limbs that usually end in surgical tools. I'm just going to get this on his, well, I'm going to say his, but you really can't tell what gender when they are covered head to toe like this. And while someone may make the assumption that because this particular model doesn't have breasts, that it must be a male by default, in the end there hasn't been enough released on Cephalyx physiology to really say one way or another. Could be anything under these robes. We do know they have legs because one of their warcasters, Excellent Thexus, does have legs showing that are pretty much dangling useless in front of him and are tied together and off to the side just to keep them out of the way. Okay, that gets the first layer of color on his robe almost. Now for the Drudges. Ah, 09044 tan skin. And the Cephalyx abduct humans and turn them into these near mindless drudges. They are lobotomized, pumped full of steroids, and have weapons grafted to them. Not necessarily in that order. And they also turn their captives into monstrosities, which is what they use instead of warjacks or war beasts. I will be doing one in a later video. But in terms of monstrosities, picture something the size of the Incredible Hulk with weapons for arms, and you're pretty close. And yeah, this guy, most of these guys are cut, well, actually there's male and female sculpts here, I think. But they are covered in bandages, which I'll be picking out a little later. Right now I'm just going to worry about getting the flesh tone. Now the Mindbender's Drudges have this little lens up front that it uses to project its psychic powers through at the expense of making said Drudges' heads explode, more or less. But the Mindbender can project the same power through 3 different Drudges simultaneously, meaning every time it takes a casting action to use a power, it gets to channel it through up to 3 Drudges. I think this sculpt is supposed to be female. I think so many bandages it's hard to tell. Definitely lighter of build than the other sculpts. I think there are breasts under the bandages, but then again, tough to tell in any case. I'm going to be doing the same funky skin tone on all of them. There's another similar unit that's more melee-oriented called a Mind Slaver in Drudges. The Mind Slaver lacks the powers of the Mind Bender, but his Drudges are better suited to combat than these are with better weapons. These particular Drudges just have a pair of weak fists that are okay for infantry, and that's about it. Their real purpose is just being used as disposable arc nodes, which, for those of you who's learning about Warmachine for the first time, an arc node's a piece of equipment some models have that lets spellcasters extend their range of their spells through. And I'll be picking out the bandages and all this embedded machinery later. Right now, the spells that the Mindbender has access to is a spray attack, basically a psychic assault. There's another psychic pulse that he can do, which is basically a big bomb, and it even specifies you can still use that in hand-to-hand, which is actually nice for high defense, low armor enemies. And it can put out a pretty nasty buff that beefs up Drudges when paired with the other Drudge unit. That can be absolutely horrible. Well, at least to whoever they're going up against. Jump these guys up ahead in the queue because I really want to play my Cephalyx, and since the changes when the new versions of the theme forces came out, I actually can again. It's been a while, but I really like these guys. I'm surprised it took as long as it did for us to get the Cephalyx models. First ones came out in first edition and were allies, which at the time were mercenaries, or no, faction models that could be used in certain mercenary armies, which used to be called charters. But the Cephalyx models that came out at that time all had a rule called selective, citing that they could only be included in charters that specifically listed them, but there weren't any. Not until the Cephalyx came out as a faction in their own right. Need some more paint. And the ally models have been completely replaced with the partisan rule. So there are several Cephalyx models that are mercenaries that will work for Crix and count as Crix models. And for Crix does have an alliance with the Cephalyx, essentially taking a portion of the bodies, portion of the living captives taken at the end of every fight. And their alliance allowed them to greatly expand their numbers, making them even more of a threat than they were before. Previously, thought of as just kind of boogeymen guys. In fact, one of the things a Privateer Press spokesman stated when the Cephalyx were announced as getting all these models, including Warcasters, was that, someone says Crix are coming, people are going to worry. Somebody says, we got to be careful, there's Cephalyx in the sewers, no one's going to know what they are. And there hasn't been much fiction on them yet either. And nothing of what they do outside of their alliance with Crix. And that was where the menace comes from for these characters, because no one knows what their penultimate goals are, but they are rivals and hated enemies of the convergence of Cirrus, and seem to be competing for the same ley lines that this convergence is trying to realign, which also runs foul of Circle Orboros and the Retribution of Syra, who both kind of draw on them. And as I collect B-grade movies, there is one that is probably as close as you're going to get to seeing a Cephalyx Drudge in action. Came out a few years ago, straight to DVD, called Frankenstein's Army. And in this movie, the grandson of the original Dr. Victor Frankenstein is continuing his ancestors' work for Nazi Germany during the tailing days of World War II. And the movie revolves around a Soviet Union commando squad doing pathfinding leading up to the March on Berlin, running across this guy and his creations. It's actually not bad. And it's, like I said, probably the closest thing you're ever going to see to a Cephalyx Drudge on the big screen. Anyway, just about done with this first base coat, and I'm going to let it dry, which shouldn't take too terribly long because it's a nice hot day again. And two more. Try not to get this too thick. Well, I'm not trying to avoid hitting the mechanical parts. Not too worried about this step. I should note that their fists are mechanical, not flesh and blood. And earlier rules for the Cephalyx models when they first came out seem to imply that the hand-mounted weapons are actually modular, and that the Drudges can be refitted quickly for different tasks. The Cephalyx primarily use them for manual labor and just send them wave after wave into combat as needed, essentially using them as literal meat shields to keep enemy forces off of them. But that said, the Drudge models themselves become considerably weaker without the Cephalyx guiding them. The only purpose of these particular Drudges are to channel the spells through. They're very weak in melee, and their counterpart Drudges in the Mind Slavery unit, while better in hand-to-hand, still lose significant abilities when their Cephalyx commander is killed. Most of these Cephalyx models do have stealth or other defensive abilities to keep in play longer, but they can still be vulnerable to lucky AoEs, i.e. big explosive attacks. I think I got exactly enough to get the job done here with this amount of paint I've got. I think I have enough. It can be a guessing game sometimes. I'm also not too worried about getting a full, thorough coat on the skin tone here, because when I'm done, they're going to look sickly and disgusting, because they have who knows what pumped into them. Okay, let that dry, move on in a bit. Alright, let's see about the next step. That's not it. There we go. 09062 leather white. Let's see, get some bandages here. too much water. Just trying to make sure I don't miss any bandages before moving on to the next model. Most of them have these concentrated around their legs. It's got some of his elbow here. See, just making sure this other guy doesn't have anything on his feet. Okay. So, the Mind Slaver Drudges, for physical differences, use the same kit overall, but their helmets are closed and lack this lens. They have the eyeless sight ability, but also their arms end in weapons like drills, buzzsaws, and heavy cleaving blades. Ah, it's hot. My brain's starting to bake in my skull. But the kids do use the same bodies. So there is potential to mix and match. But the original kit for the Mind Slaver and Drudges had one sculpt with a pair of fists. There's one with a fist and a sword. One with a buzzsaw and a drill. A third with a sword blade and a flail. And in that first edition of Warmachine, the Cephalyx Mind Slavers Drudges could pick from one of 3 abilities each turn, provided the unit leader was still in play. The unit leader being the actual Cephalyx model, but in first edition there was no field promotion rules, so a very effective strategy to shutting down units was just assassinating the leaders. Which meant they could not give or receive orders. Which meant no charging and not a whole lot they could do. In third edition, there are apparently still situations where you can prevent a unit from field promoting a new leader when the oldest is killed, but those are very rare. But it's just kind of strange that would take the unit assassination thing out of the game, and yet still have exceptions. Let's see, I think I need to check that other maybe female sculpt. Nah, I got the bandages on. That one's hip. But yeah, when it comes to abducting people to lobotomize and turn into cannon fodder, the Cephalyx do not gender discriminate. Okay, last drudge. Did I? Nope, I got her arm. Right. Don't know if you can hear that, but it sounds like some of my neighbors got caught out in the open when the sprinklers came on. Okay. That's got the bandages. Next, 09002 deep red. So this is a color I vary on each unit, so I can quickly tell them apart. So this is just going to go on the second panel on his robes here, his surgical apron. Then I'll mimic this on the Drudges loincloths. In this heat, if I luck out, it should be those all should be dry enough to do this on. As soon as I finish up here. Let's see. It's a little tricky right in here to tell which fold is which part. In terms of undercuts right here, it's not bad at all, actually. Okay. Get that off the leg there. A little bit of red might be okay, but I don't want to overdo any of it. It's not even in camera. Okay, I'm at least in camera. Still need to upgrade it as soon as I can A, afford to, and B, find a decent model. Does what I want it to do. The latter part has been the trickier. There have been times in the last few months where I could have afforded one, but I just couldn't find one before I had to divert the money to something else. Okay, 2 left. It's just really, really hot again. I know there's sections of the world who've got that much worse than I do. Okay, last loincloth. I think there's one more base coat I can do before I have to let things dry. Okay, yeah. Maybe 2 more. So, give it a shot. 09206 Tarnished Steel. I keep saying that too fast, and that's why I keep screwing up the pronunciation. It's Tarnished Steel. And that's going to be more than enough, because this is just going on the blades on the Cephalyx Mindbender's prosthetic arms here. And despite their appearance, these tools, and yes, they are more tool than weapon, are generally implements of surgery, and most of these cephalids have pretty weak melee attacks, but there's a few with anatomical precision or other abilities that let them punch through armor to inflict a lethal wound, at least against basic soldiers. They are meant more for delicate surgical manipulations than causing injury. And then, what do I do with it? There we go. 09122 Terran Khaki. These drudges all have hoses in various parts of their bodies, pumping fluids from one area to another. And I can't remember which book, but the Cephalyx drudges do eat. Described with the Khador Warcaster Strakov trying to rescue Karchev the Terrible from Cephalyx clutches. Found a food source by following the drudges around, and they basically hooked up some of these pipes into dispensers that spewed out what he described as a thick, yeasty gruel that smelled strongly of fish. And Cephalyx drudges don't eat unless ordered to. And I think we can assume they're only ordered to in order to maintain biological function. After all, a dead drudge can't work or serve as cannon fodder. Interesting to see what role the Cephalyx play moving forward. Let's see, I'm going to rearrange these a little bit here. Let's see. This sculpt just has the one going from approximately the throat directly to the stomach. And Cephalyx have a technology unique to them that they call Cephalomech, which seems to largely involve surgical augmentation of themselves and their slaves. While they technically use psychic powers instead of spells when putting them into the game, including the Warcasters, Pewter Press said it's close enough to magic they didn't feel they needed to do a new rule set to deal with that. Which is fair enough. There's a rumor going around that the next new faction after Crucible Guard is going to be Infernals, which are basically the demons of the Iron Kingdoms. And that they're going to be designed as a Warmachine faction. Pewter Press is still on this kick where they want to do a new faction every year, but I and other friends of mine who play this feel that maybe they should slow down on that a bit. Okay. Just 3 left. Yeah, in terms of rules, I think this style of Drudge has eyeless sight as well. They just also have the equipment to act as arc nodes to the mind spender that they are. I keep trying to intersperse the 2 different Cephalyx models in these squads. I don't know why. But I think they have eyeless sight. They just have the additional equipment needed hardwired in their little heads so that they can arc psychic powers as well. I missed a bit of bandage and leg over here. Take care of that real quick and just get that filled in like that. Quick squirt of tan skin, since what I've got here is now dry as a bone. And when I think about that phrase, that's an odd one, but not really in the mood to discuss old theaters of speech. Okay. I think just one, yeah, just one base coat left. No, 2 base coats left. I can start lighting effects. Okay. And next up, Bruise Purple 09119. Okay. Come on, a little more. No, gonna have to hope that's enough. This particular bottle's getting really obstinate. Fortunately, it's only going on one part of this model, and that is the upper layer of its smock. I don't know if that would be the technically correct word for it, but what I'm going to use right now because I can't think of a better one at this time. Looks like I've got enough. I'm gonna have to replace this these paints soon. Okay. And while that dries, 09197 Old Bronze. And this is going on all the mechanical parts of the Drudges. And there are quite a bit of tiny little knobs here and there all over. Yeah, it's okay. I think. A particular sculpt doesn't seem to have too much in the way of the excess little bits on it, though. It's a little different. Okay, I think that's supposed to be machinery too, and forgot this sculpt has this anklet. backtracking at some of these valves I changed my mind about. Just 5 models left now. Now this kind of augmentation along the spine is much more common among Cephalyx drudge models and monstrosity models, which you'll see in a few videos. Need a little more paint. Just gotta be mindful of the clock. I have work today. Just making sure I get everything before moving on to the next model. That got way too thick, so just thin it out, dab it off with a towel. That's why I keep this handy. So let's try that again. Okay, that'll get it. Okay, well, this is the last drudge. Once I'm done with him, I just need to put a bit of this on the mind bender. And now going back to the mind bender. So, just carefully picking out machinery here. Of course, that extends to his extra prosthetic limbs. So just to forewarn, there are actually very few Cephalyx models I'll be doing painting videos for, primarily because I actually have most of what I need already. That's in terms of completely maximizing the faction, or sub-faction in this case. So for example, I've already got my maximum allotment of Mind Slavers and Drudge units. I'd only need one more of the Mind Bender units and just 2 more monstrosities to really max out what I'm trying to get, aside from Cognifex Siphon. So, few painting videos just because of I've already got almost everything. Okay. And then I'm going to take 09037 Pure Black. Just very carefully get that little peg on the bottom. That's connecting the Cephalyx to the base. A lot of models like this would probably be using flight stands these days, but while I think those were available, I don't think a full flight stand works very well for the sculpt. And on top of that, the Cephalyx don't actually fly, they just kind of hover a little bit. And then I'll start the lighting effects after shading, so for now, I'm just going to have to let that dry. Alright, time to start shading. Dusky Grape 09118. The label's faded. Actually, this particular set of paint in general is not so good in terms of condition right now. I don't know if it was mixed wrong in the first place or if it's just not been used enough, but make sure I'm in camera. And the little windstorm's coming up. In northern Colorado, where I live, gets a little bit of the infamous Wyoming wind, but not nearly as often. And I can go ahead and take, if I can find it, Blackened Steel 09205. Just a dot of that. You can get his blades shaded as well. And then Khaki Shadow 09121. And again, about half paint, half water. don't mind that tone. If you heard it, that was just another automatic update on my computer, which honestly I do not trust. There's not really much way to shut them off. Well, some of them are useful. It's just I don't particularly like my computer, changing settings and upgrading itself without my input or permission, but that's the way Windows 10's configured. I'm gonna have to let that dry, so come back in a bit. Okay. 09196 aged pewter. Just a bit more. Okay. And in no particular order here. Okay. Before I forget that anklet, I'm assuming it's more of a manacle. Just 4 left, counting this guy right here. Gonna need a little more paint. But not much. last one. I'm fine over there. Okay. I'm going to try to do one more for the sake of speeding this up, even if not just a little. Red brick 09001. So moving around just a bit and see if I can do this. Looks like I'll be okay. Should be alright. Okay, so I lucked out. This is just barely dry enough to work with for this. Even then I have to be careful. Might have been better to let this dry completely before trying this, but I'm trying to speed this up a bit if I can. Really want to get the rest of my Cephalyx good to go so I can start playing them again. Okay, so that's going to leave the bandages and then the skin for the Drudges anyway. The Overlord, or the Mindbender Overlord is something else I'll be getting to soon. Just has his main color left. Then it's lighting and highlighting. Alright, 09039 pure white. Get ready to start the lighting effects. I'm thinking this right. This should get some time saved for me. Just getting the lenses here. And then 09061 white. So this is more of an off-white. Looks like there's a little bit of almost yellow in it, but wrong white. Get the mind bender out of the way a bit. Oh, knock that one right over. Again, wrong white. Gotta watch that a little more. Let's see. Just make sure I'm not missing any bandages. I think I'm okay. Two left. Last one. Hit the wrong white again. And 09115 Ritterlich blue. Just dabbing on around the head, being very careful not to nick the bronze. And likewise around the arms, being careful not to nick the apron in front of the robes. This took less time than I thought it would. Okay, that's just going to leave the flesh on the drudges and the lighting effects. Then I can move on to highlighting. Okay, let's go ahead and start lighting effects. 09101 ruby red. This is going to get thinned out more than usual. From in camera. So going around the perimeter, letting it fill in. If I get it just right, some of that light will show through. And then I'm going to take Ashen Blue 09057. And this is an example of how if you mix up your shading and highlighting, you can get some interesting effects. In this case, I want these drudges to look unhealthy, sickly. For all they're pumped full of more drugs and who knows what else than you would expect a human body to be able to take, so... This is slightly different than what I've done on some of my other drudges. I've used, I think, ghoul skin. Can't remember the tag for that color, the number for that color right this minute, but doesn't matter much what specific color you can choose to distort the skin tone with. The point of this is to make it look unnatural. too much paint, not enough water, so just thin it out a bit more. And again on the chest there. Just a little bit of water. Get it on there, thin it out some more. Back. Kind of screwed up there, so I'll just. Okay. That's alright. Just gonna roll with it. Well, that white wasn't completely dry, it seems. That's alright. I'll roll with it. I'm just making sure to keep the paint really thin during this one. Another part of doing something like this, if the shade isn't really meant to go with the paint you're using, you might have to thin it out a little more, or a lot more in this case. Two more. I got on the bronze there. Okay. That's the last of the shading, but there's one more thing I'm going to do. Pure white 09039 again. So since I'm using a light color, a bright yellow for my front orcs on the Mercenaries, I'm going to need to go over the black with a white first, since it's going to because it will make it more difficult to, what's the wording I'm looking for? It's been a long day. It's more difficult to do bright colors on black primer. So, just going to get the arcs started with a layer of white, so that I only have to put on one layer of yellow as opposed to 2 or 3. Because something I've noticed when I do that is the paint itself, for some reason, will crack. And I'm not worried about any splash over from the shading or highlighting here, because that little bit that'll happen will get covered up by the yellow I put on later. But for now, I do need to take this step here. Give me a little more paint. Don't have quite enough to do what I need to do with this. Being really careful around the feet where they touch or extend over the base. Want to get the base, not the model I spent so much time painting. Whoa. 3 more? Yeah, it's splotchy, but it's fine. This doesn't need to be a perfect, flawless coat here. It's just to lighten it up so that I can get the arc in one go. And as far as why I won't use a white primer on this is I overall do want the darker colors. Having a brighter color here and there does not affect my overall paint scheme or my desire to color it the way I do. But again, once I get my Relic Knights Kickstarter models, then you'll see the difference between white and black primer as I paint those. Oh, crap. Missed him. Don't know how, but okay. Well, we'll just go ahead and finish this since I've already started. And correct my mistake real quick. This is a little trickier since I only have a small area to hold on to here, but I can work with it. I've dealt with worse. I think I might even have dealt with worse on camera by this point. Okay. Okay, it's got it fixed. All right. Okay. Let that all dry up and then start highlighting and detailing. Okay, time to start highlighting. Tanned highlight 09045. A little bit more. So here's kind of the end result of that shading swap. You see that it's giving the skin just enough of discoloration to look weird. And just like the highlighting swap in the last 2 videos on those Hordes Pharaoh models, You can get some interesting effects. But this does take trial and error, and quite a lot of that to figure out how it works. Get this cleaned and dried out thoroughly before the next layer. And then 09037 pure black. Whoa, that is not mixed properly. So you can see here how translucent this is, how kind of, for lack of a better word, gooey that is. That is not what you want. That's much better. Bad paint, good paint. I'm just going to take this and go over the kind of flight peg underneath again really quick. That's good enough. And now 09117 cyan blue. This may not show up well, very well, especially on this camera, but this is a pretty subtle one. And this really makes any edges here pop just magnificently. Unfortunately, it is fairly subtle unless seen in person. But let's see next. Zero 09063 Ghost White. And this is another subtle one. Little knot in my wrist there. One of my problems is I keep putting a death grip on these brushes and markers, pencils, whatever. I need to kind of break that habit. I don't have to do that. It's not good for me to do that, but I keep doing it anyway. It's just... Don't know why I do that either. And last one. Okay. Go ahead and use the other side of this. Get a little coffee in me. And 09003 blood red. Seems a bit wet. And this is just going on loincloths here. So on my Mine Slaver and Drudge units, one has olive green loincloths, another has violet and red here, and I'm just kind of mimicking that on these units. It's just one way of doing a subtle difference. The Stormblade infantry video I did a while ago, I did white patches on the elbows, hands, knees, and feet. And the first unit I got does not have that detail. My 2 units of steelhead halberdiers, one has khaki padding under the armor, the other has green. I just nicked the bandages on her a bit. Touch that up real quick. It was less subtle on my Ritterlich or Dwarven models, with one unit of Organhold Forge Guard having green armor, another being khaki, and my Hammerfall High Shield Gun Corps, one has yellow armor, the other red. With mercs, I call them as I see them. There was something in one of the books that said the Dwarves of the Searforge Commission do wear bright colors, and I don't like doing the military drab colors on everything. It's okay, there's nothing wrong with it, it's okay on some stuff in my book, but just doing it on everything, I prefer brighter colors personally. Okay, next up, Faded Purple 09120. This gave me more trouble than any other paint I owned last time I used it. And I guess I'm going to have to do this the really hard way. I would not advise this, but this thing is just about shot and I cannot coax anything out of here. I don't know what's going on. I don't know that I even care, but... Alright. So, This is what I would call a desperation move to get paint out of there. So I'm just going to have to set these aside and get the whole thing replaced this week before I use this color again. And it's just going on the last, this uppermost part of the apron here. So I'm just going to set that whole triad of paints aside so I remember to get it replaced later this week. And how about 09207 True Silver? Don't need very much of that at all. Oh hey, just 2 left. Next up, 09198 Tarnished Brass. Finally I said that right, good grief. Just chalking up my difficulties with saying that and a few other words up to being surrounded by coworkers who well, they can barely speak English despite the fact that English is their primary and exclusive language. Now this one's about cached. That should be enough though. And I've got a spare on hand for this anyway, so I'm in good shape. That gets their brain-busting commander out of the way. And I put it like that because, once again, he's basically busting their little heads to extend his range on his powers. But because of my work schedule, I don't get to play nearly as often as I would like, and I can generally only get in 1 game a week, so I'm one of the worst players locally, but one of the best painters. But the Cephalyx I got a pretty good handle on. This particular unit, you'll definitely want all the Drudges basically getting sacrificed to channel the Mindbender's powers, his spells. That gets the most bang for your buck, and they're practically useless in hand-to-hand because of poor mat bonus and fairly weak weapons. I'm just going to scoot these over a little bit so I don't lose track. Yeah. Last week, my friends and I were in a debate about privateers' desire to put out a new faction every year, and general consensus among us is we think they should slow down between re-releasing Monster Apocalypse, which I am really looking forward to. It's one of my favorite games, and trying to do a new faction every year in other games. I feel they might be stretching themselves a bit too thin, and some factions in Warmachine, especially the way they're doing the CID by looking at a specific subgroup of models each time, doesn't really, it could result in the game being imbalanced. And some factions and sub-factions may not be getting enough attention. The Cephalyx is one of those sub-factions, but to be fair, they don't, I think I mentioned this before, they really don't need much of anything else. Maybe just one more Warcaster, and maybe another solo, or maybe two. Maybe a big beefy Drudge with shield guard and a pair of shields. But that's just personal musings. Again, it kind of surprised me that it took as long as it did for the Cephalyx to get, you know, more than just 2 models. Because they came out in Mark 1 and didn't get anything for years and years and couldn't be used in Merc charters like all the other ally models because there weren't any that would allow them to be used. That's me rambling so that there's not so much dead air in this video. I tend not to talk a whole lot when I'm working, especially when I'm working by myself. Stretching that knot out of my arm again. It's the last drudge that needs the bronze. But as for what's under these drudge helmets, not a whole lot. Can't remember which book, but when Kedorn Warcaster Strakov was rescuing Karchev the Terrible from Crix's clutches, he rescued some mechanics that had been captured and were being turned into drudges, and their faces were pretty chopped up by the time he got to them. Okay, dry that out, and one more color to highlight. Then we'll get the arcs continued on, and where is it? Khaki highlight 09123. Just going on these hoses. This might be a bit too wet. Let's see. This sculpt just has the one going from mouth to what would be technically the intestinal area, but most people refer to that as the stomach. Stomach's actually up in the rib cage. But that's just me being technical. You can really see on there how that raised edge catches the highlight, leaves the shaded area nice and dark. And on this kit, these heads, they're all kind of mix and match. The hands too. So basically right and left, open and closed, and then 3 different head sculpts. They're pretty much compatible with any body. Okay, now got the color on the arc, and that's going to be 09008 Sun Yellow. Uh-oh. I more or less chose these colors partially based on what was appropriate for the faction, such as blue for Signar or light green for Crix, but it's kind of picked at random on, well, almost at random on other factions where I didn't really have any ideas. I'm trying not to repeat the same color twice, at least not within each game. Careful around the toes. Now that gets the arc in just 1 coat. Last one. Okay, once that's dry, I can finish up the arcs and then start flocking. Alright, 09037 Pure Black. Time to get the arcs finished up. And those of you who've not played this game ever, Warmachine relies on a front and back arc. So this cutting mat I have here I've explained in other videos, is something that the company that makes Warmachine, Privateer Press, puts out. And it's just a self-healing cutting mat, but this one has markings on it for the most common base sizes in Warmachine. So you can get this done. So just carefully. Just going to paint a little line for now. Then backfill them all in a minute. Let's see, and this is helping me get the facing. And as I've also mentioned before, in Warmachine you make attacks through your front arc, and some models have an ability called what is it? What is it? It's not sneak attack, it's backstrike, that's it. No, it's not backstrike either. Backstab. But you get an advantage attacking models on their back arc, and models with backstab do extra damage. That ability is fairly uncommon, though. Make sure that's centered. Get him set aside because I want to backfill his base first. There's a reason for that. Doing a little bit more like that, I think. Doing this takes a really steady hand. Getting the paint off of there to make this, keep the indentations as nice as I can, so I can use this for years and years and years. And switch into a bigger brush. Carefully staying inside the lines I just finished up. And this is just one way to mark them. Some of my friends just put little dots on the edges of the arc. And careful right here, I want it on the base, not the model's feet. Yeah, that's okay. Just patience and practice. Those are the keys to doing this. As you get more experienced, you'll be able to speed up. But it still takes a lot of work. And in many cases, when you're dealing with a squad of soldiers like this, if you work on the whole squad at one time instead of each model individually, you'll save time overall. Simply by doing the same color on every model as you get to it. Just 3 left, including this fella. Though this might be a woman, again, kind of hard to tell. But there's enough clues on the model to make me think that this drudge was a woman at one point in time, before getting abducted by these Cephalyx and getting turned into a lobotomized meat shield anyway. Last one. Now let's see. Not quite dry enough for me to do what I need to do to him still, so let that dry completely, and then move on to move the last little bit to the Cephalyx Mindbender, and start flocking. Okay, might get a little glitchy here. I got another weird error message. 09039 pure white. Just the barest dot of that. What the? Oh well. And since this is the second unit of Mindbender and Drudges that I've got, my brush is not being very cooperative right this second. I'm going to put a little Roman numeral 2 on the back of the Mindbender's base, so that all I have to do to tell the units apart on a card is to just write a quick Roman numeral, and that's it. Now, white glue. I use Elmer's glue all. That's kind of a personal preference. And again, there's other stuff that'll probably work just as well. And plenty of water to dilute. And a sacrificial brush, which is what I've been using. This one. No, not that one. Where is it? I had a great one. That's this. No, it's not. Oh, well, I guess I'll just roll with whatever this is. Could have sworn I had a new one ready for this, but whatever. I'll just roll with it. So just brushing in and around the base, getting around the feet. Now with these slot bases, I do put down masking tape around the areas where there's no miniature. That way the basing material stays inside the base and doesn't fall through and make a gap. Taking a dry brush and just dusting away from the feet there. Oh, what the heck I do with it? That isn't it. Oh boy. No, here's the one I've been using. It just got buried. Okay, that's better. Lost track where it was. And just a dip in the flock there and knocking off the excess. Again, what's nice about the bases Privateer Press uses that it provides are that they have a little lip around the edge, which helps keep the basing material and helps catch that. Okay. And taking the dry brush and dusting away from the feet. Just set the mind bender aside for a minute. If you were going to comment on the masking tape I use, if it curls up, sometimes it does. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. If you're doing this properly, and I'm assuming you are, then it'll get covered up reasonably well by all the flock, so it's a non-issue. And I chose to use flock fairly arbitrarily. Just kind of the first basing material I used, and I just want to make a match for the most part. But the thing about the fighting in Warmachine hordes is, while there have been a few epic battles in cities, most of the armies try to keep the fighting out of them by engaging their enemies before they start laying siege, leaving many encounters happening out in the wilds or in rural areas instead of more populated ones. Little divot there. Three left. And the reason I don't mark any models except the leader Warmachine is most infantry can only take 1 point of damage before they're killed and removed from play. So that's why I only bother to designate the leader, since that matters even if they can't take 1 more point of damage, since your grunts have to stay within the leader's command range to be maximum effective. But if a model can take more than 1 point in a unit, then I will mark them all 1A, 1B, etc., 2A, 2B, etc. So that can be quickly told what model and what unit they belong to. Last one. Okay. Need to let that set for a bit, and there's one last step I need to do before calling it quits. Okay, last step. Scenic Cement. Now that the flock has had a chance to set, my dropper. Use a glass one because this stuff will stick to a plastic one and jam it up more thoroughly and sooner. And then just carefully apply. And the reason you want to wait is if you do this right away, this will push the flock or other basic material around, make little divots. But doing this gives this stuff a rock hard finish and keeps it on the base and not flying around all over the place. And this is a spray or brush on adhesive. I don't know if this is a Woodland Scenics product. I don't know if there's anything similar, but there should be. So sometimes you're just kind of stuck using what's available, and when what's available works, you don't see the point of trying to deliberately find other alternatives. In fact, the only reason I've switched paints once already and am likely to switch brands of paint a second time is because of availability. I used to use Citadel paints, But then several years ago, they switched up their formulas, but the problem was they left a gap of about 6 months between the time the old stuff was discontinued and the new stuff was available. So that's a pretty bad decision from a business perspective. Because people either scrambled to buy everything they could or, like me, switched brands. And now the Reaper Master Series I am using is having some availability problems, with certain colors apparently being discontinued, which is ridiculous. So I'm starting to test out Army Painter now. We'll just see how it goes. But really, any paint for this designed specifically for this hobby will do. I know Privateer Press puts out official paints, Formula P3. I haven't tried those myself. They're probably fine. And I've heard Vallejo's good. Haven't done them myself either, but I guess I need just a bit more. And that's it. Cephalyx Mindbender and Drudges. Got, what do I got here? 4 more Warmachine models coming up, 2 of them being Cephalyx, and then I'm going to be probably doing some Space Marines for a little bit. Until next time, I am Ian Stuckey with Mastermind Games, signing out.